It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about TKO's finances. We are also going to talk about some boxing. We're going to take a look at DAZN and the big moves that they are making in sports. But before we do all of those things, we're going to remind you to pick up a paid subscription, because not only do you help us keep the lights on, you help yourself to all of the content that sits behind a paywall. Our episodes are divided into two pieces. We basically take them and cut them in half. And the first half you get to listen to for free. But the second half is behind a paywall. And then you have to pony up a few bucks so that you can listen. But the good news is it's only $5 a month. We are on the lower end of the paid tiers. So, you know, couch cushion change can do the trick. And for all of you out there that maybe can't afford it, we still appreciate you too. And you can still help us by sharing our content far and wide on your social media. So those are the ways you can help us out. And right now we are going to help you out by giving you an awesome show. So, John, how the hell are you?
Oh boy. This show might be a chore to get through. As everybody knows, if you've been listening the last couple of weeks, I've had bronchitis, still got it, not as bad, still cough, but I had to walk a distance today, and I've been trying to take it easy. So I'm now wheezing and out of breath. So we might have that to deal with today.
Oh no.
Incredibly out of breath, John Nash.
So, John, I see lots of people out there with some great stories, but they sound very familiar to me. Like, I don't know, maybe those stories were listening, the people that were writing those stories were listening to our podcast. What do you think of that?
I mean, it's possible. There has been a lot of good stories that have repeated stuff that we talked about on our podcast. You never know for sure if they got it from our podcast or not. But if you are listening to the podcast and you find information in it useful, it would be nice to acknowledge that you picked up the tidbit from the podcast. But again, there's no way to know for sure. It's a vast universe. Random chance someone could find the same subject, the same take, whatever. But it's been eyebrow raising sometimes as you point these out to me.
Yes, indeed. So I have to tell you, I watched a superhero movie this week, actually, because Eric's only been off for 2 days out of the past 30 days. Yeah, 2 days out of 30. So we went over and we saw Spider-Man Brand New Day, and I was surprised how good it was, because it's been breaking records. It's broken the record for the biggest weekend in history ever. It has already cleared $1.1 billion globally in 4 days or 5. It's massive. So I had already planned to see it because I am a fan of comic book movies. I can't help myself. But I'm also a fan of Tom Holland and Zendaya. I like them both. It's really cool. They're married to each other and all that good shit. But the movie is really good. I just have to tell you that. It's really good. I was so shocked.
The Spider-Man, I'm not quite familiar with this. Is it a person? Is it a monster? Is it? I'm not sure I'm familiar with this story.
Yeah, it's real good though. You would actually take a look at it and say, this one's not half bad.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think you would. It's got a really good plot and it's well fleshed out. I was so happily surprised with this movie. And
who's the villain? Who's the villain in this one?
she's not. She's like an anti-hero more than a villain. Jean Grey.
Wait, why is Jean Grey the anti-hero villain? Okay, I'm lost already. You know what? I don't even want to discuss this. This sounds like sacrilegious from my 80s.
It's not
reading
actually
comics in the 1980s.
It is from the old Marvel Comics universe, as a matter of fact. But yes, it's the young Jean Grey. It's pretty
Young
cool.
Jean Grey is the antagonist to Spider-Man. I do not remember that storyline in my comic book reading days, and I read basically everything from the Steve Ditko Spider-Man all the way through the Roger Stern and later in the 80s. So I do not remember that.
You have to check it out. It's so good. So good. And Frank Castle's in it, and he is from the comic as having saved Spider-Man. And oh my God, the scene where he walks out carrying
having saved Spider-Man. He was Spider-Man's a foe back in the day.
Yeah, he has also saved Spider-Man. There's a lot of comparison to that particular storyline. So you have to check it out. You'll have to.
I do not think I have to. I do not have to.
You have to. It's worthwhile. Of all the comic book movies over the last several years, this one's kind of worthwhile. I was so pleasantly surprised.
I think I'm going to rewatch. I think I'm going to rewatch Diary of a Country Priest instead.
You have been pushing that a lot lately.
I did. That's a good movie, actually. I do it as a kind of a joke, but it's a good movie.
You have been pushing. I saw you trying to push it on Ben Folks for Co-Main Events movie night.
Yep.
We need to do a movie night again.
Okay.
We do. We need to do a movie night. But anyways.
Not a superhero movie night.
No, not a superhero. I like when we do classic movie night.
Okay.
I want to do like a spaghetti western. I want to do the good, the bad, and the ugly. I love that movie.
That's a great movie.
It's an awesome movie.
That is a very good movie, and you hear no complaints from me over here about that movie.
See, there you go. That's what we need to do next. That movie. But anyways, what we need to do right now is we need to start with our OG question. And that is, are there any new filings or updates to the UFC antitrust cases?
There is a few. One did not come out of Nevada. It came out of San Francisco, actually, for the Ninth Appeals Court, and it involves for the Ninth Circuit, and it involves Cirkunov v. Zuffa. And in that, there's two entries, actually. The court granted a streamlined extension request, setting the amended briefing schedule, and there's an optional reply brief due on August 24th, 2026, and then for all appellants, and then on July 29th, 2006, a notice came out that the case is being considered for oral argument in San Francisco, either the November 2026 sitting or the following month. So this fall, it might. Now, it didn't say for sure. It said it's being considered. Both parties have 3 business days to file what's called a Form 32. If there's a scheduling conflict or a joint motion to refer to mediation, if they want to discuss settlement before an argument date is set, and the calendar assignment notice would come roughly 10 weeks ahead of the actual date. And those may not recall, the UFC filed an appeal over Cirkunov because Cirkunov signed the arbitration agreement and class action waiver. So theoretically, he cannot go to court like he has been right now, challenging the UFC contracts that made fighters sign an arbitration agreement and class action waiver. And so the question is, the judge is investigating right now if the UFC violated Nevada law with this arbitration agreement and class action waiver, because there's the potential that in the Judge Boulware court that he could he could throw out the arbitration agreement, basically saying it's unenforceable. But at the same time, it's still there. So the defendants have appealed the case, saying he should be forced to go to arbitration. And so there's a question: will the Ninth Circuit pick up this case? They may or may not. Right now, it looks like they're looking at it, they're considering it, but we do not know for sure. Then the other 2 filings was A document 108, it's a second request, and a document 109, the first request. I don't know why they filed these out of order, but the first request is a joint stipulation and order in Constantino v. Zuffa, covering the briefing schedule on defendant's forthcoming motion to compel arbitration, and it confirms the defendant's motion to dismiss and motion to compel arbitration were both due July 21st, 2020, July 21st of this year, and it sets plaintiff's opposition to the arbitration motion for September 4th, and defendant's reply for October 2nd. So, this is consistent with the court's already existing schedule order, and this was signed by Judge Boulware. And then the companion stipulation applies the identical opposition and reply deadlines to the defendant's separate motion to stay discovery. So that's the big filing so far. Nothing too exciting. We do have a status conference, I believe, at the end of this week, so we might have some more information. I don't know if it's anything major is going to happen there, because considering the falling out, the disaster the last status conference was with Eric Whedon and the spoliation. I'm sure you remember all that stuff. They were supposed to, in between that time, remember they were going to have, I believe, Mark Shapiro, but definitely Ari Emanuel was supposed to come in and testify as well. The judge dismissed those hearings because he threw out Whedon completely. And we'll find out what's going to be going forward on the next status hearing. So we'll have some information on the next show, or at least hopefully have some information about, where the case is going forward at this point.
All right. What about the Ali Revival Act? Has there been any other news come out about that following last week's unveiling of the new Senate version?
No real news per se of the kind, like, Ted Cruz made an announcement. Do we hear the schedule in Congress? Nothing like that. In fact, we probably won't hear anything for a while because the Senate goes on break now. They're going to be gone to September 14th. So we should really get no updates for a while from the Senate. Now, there has been some news in the fact that we've heard, people talking about it, discussing the bill. We also saw Nico Ali Walsh did an interview on the, what is the name of that show? The Mr. Versace podcast.
Yeah.
With Ring Magazine. And he talked about it there, and that had some information a little bit, I would say, from that. And it's worth noting because what's interesting in that podcast, we had a question in the previous episode. Does this bill represent the suggestions that Nico Ali Walsh and others made to the Senate and to TKO? So the answer we got here, apparently it does. This supposedly includes some of his suggestions. Now, I would like to ask him, which were your suggestions? Because none of these seem to really meet what you said you were looking for in the bill, what you thought the bill needed to have. Now, it has, they said he discussed disclosure, right, that it needed to keep disclosure, but it really doesn't keep disclosure at all. There's no requirement that the UBOs disclose compensation that they receive, revenue, in other words, for the events. It doesn't include that. So the disclosure is basically what the states require, and the state requirements are often not, are minor compared to that requirement. So that's one. He talked about contract provisions, protections. And the only thing additional is that 3-year debuting fighter first contract agreement in this new bill that Ted Cruz introduced. That doesn't seem like that great of fighter protections, especially when you're giving up the course of contract protection provision. And people not aware, the course of contract protection is if you have to sign with a promoter for the right to fight that promoter's boxer, then the contract cannot be more than 1 year in length. That's the protection that the the Ollie Act provides. And we've had many people on talking about how that's been the kind of like the most important part of the Ollie Act. What the most successful component of it might be the course of contract provision. We've had Kurt Emhoff have said that, Patrick English has said that, Lou DiBella agreed with it. Now, it hasn't always been enforced perfectly, but it got rid of completely the idea of options that Don King used to use all the time in the 90s. So that's been very important for boxers. And that is still in this bill, still allows a UBO to engage in what's called course of contract. So that protection's completely gone. So that has not been assisted here. He talked about, we needed some clarity on the rankings for these UBOs, some protections for fighters so that they contain the rank. They can control the rank, basically own it, I guess would be the way to phrase it, because in boxing, because of previous cases, boxers, your rank is something you can own as a boxer. So if you leave one promotion, you can take your rank with you. But here again, the UBO, they have new requirements. They have to submit all this, they have to submit the bylaws and the criteria and the rankings to the FTC, but there's nothing enforcing them. So again, that fails to live up to that part. So, he seems somewhat proud in this interview. Thinks they've been successful in getting TKO and the Senate to agree to some of their changes. But I have seen no real changes there. There's no teeth behind them. They're all superficial changes. So, I wonder, my next question would be, and hopefully he can answer this, is that does Nico Ali Walsh and his manager, Amir Abdullah, do they support this new version of the bill, or do they still oppose it? Because that's the next question. Do they support it? Because I'm not so certain why they would support it, because it doesn't include any of your suggestions. On top of that, remember when he was at the hearing in the Senate and opposed this bill, he discussed the threat that Zuffa can monopolize boxing like they did the UFC. And I noticed, and maybe it just slipped his mind, maybe it didn't come up, but he did not bring up that argument at all in this interview. And I haven't heard him bring it up lately. And so is that a concern he no longer has? So a lot of questions raised here about what position Nico Ali Walsh holds, and he is the major figure in the opposition. So it would be nice to know where he stands on the bill and the changes that they submitted.
All right. Well, we will keep everybody updated as new material unfolds. But for right now, we're going to look at TKO finances for the next big chunk of this show. Let's start with Paramount, though. Paramount's Q2 streaming profit jumped up 44% to $366 million. And I quote, that growth was primarily fueled by Paramount Plus, which added 2 million subscribers for a total of 81.6 million subscribers globally. Sports programming, including UFC, were cited as a driver. Considering all their other sports programming, how big a part did UFC have in your estimation in that 2 million extra?
It's hard to tell. We're going to have to wait another quarter or two, because two things are going on. One is the other sporting event that probably drove a lot of subscribers was the World Cup. And I don't know if you heard, that was a pretty big event. It did millions of viewers. And so I imagine large numbers of people subscribed just to get the additional games on Paramount Plus. So how do we just untangle them from what the UFC brought in? The other thing is someone else pointed out, is we had this event, their premiere on Paramount Plus with the Gaethje, was it UFC 324? And then we saw the White House event, and we saw Conor McGregor, and they all, the numbers increase from those events does not seem to be like a massive increase in viewership as we go across them. And so right now it seems like they're retaining viewers, retaining subscribers, which is very key. Less turnover, that's very important. But are they driving numerous new subscribers to the platform? They possibly could. I don't say they're not. but it's hard to tell right now. It does. I mean, they obviously give them some credit because, they highlight them specifically, so they probably play a part. But I think the secret will be to look in another quarter or two, probably the end of the year, look at all 4 quarters, because if they still have subscription growth and or retention of the current levels that they have now, we could probably we could probably say that retention is due to the UFC if they do not have another major sporting event, on Paramount Plus that would be holding them that audience. I think we could then credit the UFC to keeping them. Will they start drawing in many more subscribers? Hard to say with the UFC, because the number one thing that probably draws subscribers are big events, and we look like we've gone through a string of all their big events. I can't think of a single major event in the pipeline right now for the UFC. Can you?
No.
Is there any event coming up that's like, this is going to be gangbusters? We have their first event, UFC 324. We had the White House. We had Conor McGregor. Those are the major events that, just based on the description of how many viewers, I would guess that drew most the new subscribers to Paramount Plus who wanted it to watch the UFC. And then, so we will wait till quarter 4 is done, end of the year, and then we can get a description of how many subscribers they still have. And if they're still adding subscribers instead of losing it, then I think the UFC, we could give them a lot of credit, because they're no longer can you say it's the World Cup that's drawing fans and keeping them over a couple month period. Instead, it's the UFC is the only game in town.
All right. Now TKO's finances came out this week. What were the main takeaways from that?
Well, the number one is they're fucking rich. They're making money
rich,
again.
Bitch.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of items to just highlight here. TKO itself is doing well, but I'm going to focus on the UFC because that's what we do. We focus on the UFC, and then I'm sure later we'll talk about Zuffa Boxing. But to highlight just really briefly about TKO, what's worth noting is their stock price has actually gone down. I think it's gone up today after this came out because of how well they're doing. But they've been kind of dipping the last few months for what, I don't know exactly. But at the same time, they have been paying dividends out, right? And they've been doing stock buybacks. I know a lot of people always question, like, they use EBITDA, and EBITDA is fake. But a lot of people question, like, UFC and especially, TKO is not doing that well, or not doing as nearly as well as people claim, or UFC doesn't really do as well as people claim. It's kind of hard to deny that when they are just paying out massive amounts of dividends and stock buybacks, right? Because that means there's real cash being generated. And the majority of that cash, according to them and according to these filings, is coming from the UFC. So I think that kind of confirms UFC is, really an ATM machine, as, TKO executives have referred to it as. It is just a cash generator. So if we look at the UFC now, in the last 3 months, this quarter, compared to last year, and last year, it should be noted, this quarter 2 of this year, 2026, there was 12 events, but 3 of them were numbered events, and 9 of them were fight nights. Last year, there was only 11 events, but 4 of them were numbered events, and 7 of them were fight nights. And remember, numbered events pay, I think on average, about 3 times as much from the broadcast partner as the fight night. So a numbered event is just that much more valuable. But this year, we look at total revenue, it's gone up $120 million since last year for this quarter. Last quarter 2 of 2025, they generated $415.9 million. This year, $535.7 million. And that includes the fact that live events was the one segment that went down from $58.5 million to $47.8 million because of 2 reasons. One, they had 1 fewer pay-per-view. Those, all the pay-per-views basically are now doing around 10 million or more at the gate. And also because one was the White House Freedom 250 card, which they had no ticket sales. So they lost live event revenue for that. As they noted, they earned no live event revenue for that event. But they offset that by seeing their sponsorship and partnership going up, and their media rights. Media rights went up from $260.5 million last year for this quarter to $325.2 million. So you can see the new Paramount deal is adding a tremendous amount of money per year. If we look at the full year, the full 6 months so far, last year at this point, they were at 484.6 million, and now they're at over 600 million. And so in total, that's for media rights only. So they're already about 120 million in media rights, and their total revenue last year was at 775.6 million. Now it's at 936.9. So last year they ended up at about $1.5 billion. This, you'd have to guess, doubling it, they're going to be at $1.8, $1.9 billion, several hundred million more in revenue. The one place they could look at negatively is while their adjusted EBITDA saw an increase. In other words, they made more money. We're going to use EBITDA as a surrogate for profit, even though EBITDA is not profit. You have to make deductions, but it's a kind of we're going to use it as a surrogate to indicate profit. Last year, they had $245 million in EBITDA, and this year, $280 million. So it's gone up. But because the profit has gone up as well, not the profit, but the revenue has gone up so much for this quarter. The revenue margins, the margins of EBITDA have gone from 59% to 52%. So their margins have actually decreased this quarter compared to last year. And that's the only one negative. They still have tremendous free cash flow conversion. So this EBITDA, whatever they generate, about 60% of it, according to the earnings calls and stuff, gets converted to cash, which then can be paid out as dividends or paid for stock buybacks. So they're, again, generating tons of money, creating tons of profit. Overall, the company's just doing gangbusters, which is no surprise because this is a similar pattern. Like the last 10 years we reported on them, been doing this is basically in it the same way. They are a cash machine, just cranking out cash.
Ugh. They mentioned a $30 million loss from UFC Freedom 250. Now, we discussed this at length in several of our shows leading up to Freedom 250 because they kept drilling that point home. And both before and immediately after the event, we sort of had it figured out that they weren't actually going to lose any money. So when you saw them discuss that at this particular earnings call, what did you think? Were warning bells going off in your head?
Well, this has been picked up and reported by a lot of sites that they lost 30 million at UFC Freedom 250. Now, the thing is, and this is me just, reading, looking at it, analyzing it myself. I'm not, we're not in looking through the actual P&L sheet for the event, but my guess is, and I'm going to go through the numbers in a second that makes me make this decision or come to this conclusion. My guess is people are conflating that are covering this, that are hearing when they say we lost 30 million for this event. I think they're conflating what's called accounting losses and economic losses. An accounting loss is, you do a P&L, you look at all the revenue and all the expenses, and at the end, a $30 million loss means you're in negative, in the hole. An economic loss is that you have an event, but because you lost something that you normally could make more money on, right? In this case, the live gate and all these other additional expenses and lost revenues, that they would mark that down as a loss. In other words, we lost 30 million compared to if we'd done a traditional event, we would have made 30 more million. So that's an economic loss. The company lost $30 million. They didn't really lose the money. They made 30 million less than they would normally make. And that's different because when you look at the kind of the revenues they reported, according to the UFC, for UFC Freedom 250, the UFC this quarter generated 59 million of higher partnership revenue. And they note it was largely driven by the UFC Freedom 250 event held at the White House, as well as revenue from new sponsors and increases in fees from renewals. So some of it's not from UFC 250, but it says largely this 59 million in higher partnership revenue comes from UFC Freedom 250. Okay. And there's also the increase in revenue for their product licensing was 4.4 million, primarily due to higher royalties on UFC branded products, most notably collectibles. Now, I think there's only one event that really did a lot of collectibles, which we've been highlighting on the show. So a good portion of this additional 4.4 million of increase in product licensing revenue is likely from UFC Freedom 250. So those two things, let's just say about 60 million then in additional revenue from the higher partnership revenue and the product licensing. So they also saw increased costs this quarter, as they noted. And this increase was due to 77.2 million of higher production, athlete, and event-related costs, which was primarily associated.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!